Good evening. I hope that you've had a great day today. I hope you've been encouraged and uplifted today. I hope you've been able to enjoy the beautiful weather today. And this evening, for just a few moments, we're going to focus in on Psalm 99. Psalm 99 speaks to God's holiness. It's His character. It's who He is as God. And as we think of the word holy, words that come to mind are to be set apart. Oftentimes we think of the word sanctify or sanctified, meaning set apart, something that is separated out. And certainly God calls us to holiness. As a matter of fact, in Peter's writing, Peter recalls for us the words of God as God says, "Be holy because I am holy." God is calling us to holiness, to be set apart. And certainly the lives that we live are to be such that we are set apart from the world. We are in the world, but we're not of the world. And so in this particular psalm, the psalmist is addressing the character of God, and does so in a couple of different ways, and we'll see those in just a moment. But at the very beginning of this psalm, we see hints at the reality of what God's presence is like. So listen again. It's verse 1 as the psalmist begins. Listen to what this psalmist has to say. "The Lord reigns. Let the peoples tremble. He sits enthroned upon the cherubim. Let the earth quake." Now, we have images that are created in our minds of God sitting upon His throne. He is enthroned, He says there, upon the cherubim. Now, this calls back to mind the Ark of the Covenant. As you recall, the Ark of the Covenant was this box. It was called the mercy seat of God. This was where God supposedly dwelt, and this was His seat. And for the people of God, this was a place of reverence, a place that was considered holy. As a matter of fact, if you remember about the history of the Israelites and the making of the tabernacle and God's instruction for that, remember there was the outer court, but then the tabernacle itself had within it two separate rooms. One larger room, which was called the holy place, and then the smaller room inside the tabernacle was known as the most holy place. Now, it was the most holy place into which the high priest would enter one day a year, the day of Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. The high priest would enter in. He would sprinkle the blood on the mercy seat. This is where the Ark of the Covenant was kept. And this was considered the throne room of God. And God sat enthroned on the mercy seat. Now, if you remember the Ark of the Covenant, it was designed in such a way that there were cherubim that were on the top, on the lid portion of the chest, as it were, and their wings were outstretched toward the center, toward one another. And this was the mercy seat, the place where God sat enthroned in the most holy place, the place that was set apart, the place that only the high priest could enter. A place where when the high priest did in fact enter, he did so with a rope tied around his waist. In case something were to happen to him, they could pull him back out. This place was considered holy, set apart. It was the most holy place where the Ark of the Covenant was kept, where the mercy seat of God was, where God would sit enthroned. And so think about this again. The Lord reigns. Let the peoples tremble. He sits enthroned upon the cherubim. Let the earth quake. Now this also, at least for me, creates a bit of an image of what we see in Isaiah chapter 6. This is where Isaiah is receiving his commission from God to go and to be a prophet for God. Listen to verse 1. "In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting upon a throne, high and lifted up, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Above him stood the seraphim. Each had 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face, with 2 he covered his feet, and with 2 he flew. And one called to another and said, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory." Now listen to verse 4. and the foundations of the thresholds shook at the voice of him who called, and the house was filled with smoke. This is the throne room scene that Isaiah was able to witness. And here God is sitting enthroned. And verse 4, the foundations of the threshold shook. So think again about what the psalmist says in Psalm 99. The Lord reigns. Let the peoples tremble. He sits enthroned upon the cherubim. Let the earth quake. And then let's keep going at verse 2 out of Psalm 99. The Lord is great in Zion. He is exalted over all the peoples. Let them praise your great and awesome name. Holy is he. The King, in his might, loves justice. You have established equity. You have executed justice and righteousness in Jacob. Exalt the Lord our God. Worship at his footstool. Holy is he. Again, the psalmist is pointing to the nature of God, his character, and how he is, in fact, holy. God is set apart. He is like none other. God is holy. And so he says there in verse 2, the Lord is great in Zion. This is a representation of Jerusalem, the people of God. Again, he is exalted over all the peoples. Let them praise your great and awesome name, the psalmist says to God. And then confirms again, holy is he. And then verse 4 addresses again what God is like. He's the King who loves justice. He has established equity. He has executed justice and righteousness in Jacob. Jacob there would be again representative of the Israelites, the people of God. And then verse 5, exalt the Lord our God, worship at his footstool. That's the call from this psalmist. And then again confirming, holy is he. God is holy. Look at verses 6 and 7. Moses and Aaron were among his priests. Samuel also was among those who called upon his name. Again, priest being the picture here. They called to the Lord, and he answered them. In the pillar of the cloud, he spoke to them. They kept his testimonies and the statute that he gave them. They were faithful to what God had said. God spoke to them. And here they are, Moses, Aaron, Samuel, three very prominent priests among the people of God. This psalmist is identifying with and making sure that his reader understands that these are those that were calling upon God, and God called out to them from the pillar of the cloud. He spoke to them, he says. And they kept his testimonies. They kept his statutes that he gave them. And then listen to verses 8 and 9. O Lord, our Lord, you answered them. You were a forgiving God to them, but an avenger of their wrongdoings. Verse 8 particularly is a prayer of praise to God, acknowledging who he is, that in fact he is faithful. He answered them, he forgave them, but he didn't let them get away with wrongdoing. And then finally, verse 9, exalt the Lord our God and worship at his holy mountain, for the Lord our God is holy. Again, think about the context of what has been stated thus far. It's verse 1, the Lord reigns, let the peoples tremble. He sits enthroned upon the cherubim, let the earth quake. Here God is, the great and powerful God, the one who is holy. And he ends this psalm by saying to the people, exalt the Lord our God, worship at his holy mountain, because God, our God, he is holy. He's set apart. He's like none other. The God that we serve is a forgiving God. He is a just God. The God that we serve is a God who is faithful. He's holy. That's the message of Psalm 99. The Lord reigns. He is set apart. He is holy. He's enthroned. And so the call is for all of us Again, verse 5 and verse 9. Exalt the Lord our God. Worship at his footstool, verse 5. And then verse 9, worship on his holy mountain. Make sure that we understand God is a holy God, and we're called to exalt him. We're called to worship him. And let's make sure that we focus our hearts and our minds as we approach his throne and we recognize that he indeed is holy.